I didn't want to go back to my parents' house, and I couldn't afford rent while job hunting. My uncle offered me the place, said it was just sitting there, quiet by the water. Good for thinking. I didn't argue. I packed up my essentials, tossed them into my car, and headed 3 hours north with no real plan except to breathe. The house was exactly as I remembered it from childhood weekends. Slightly musty, creaky in the wind, the kind of place that smelled like old wood and lake air. But it had its charm. A long wooden dock stretched out into the still water, and every evening the light sank slow and golden behind the trees across the lake. That's where I first noticed her. Across the water, maybe 2 houses down, there was a small white house with wide windows and ivy creeping up the porch railings. The kind of place that looked lived in, not just visited. I didn't see her clearly at first, just the figure of a woman stepping out with a watering can, moving slowly among the plants on her porch. She had an easy posture, like someone who was used to solitude. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way she carried herself made me pause. A couple of days later, I met her by accident. I'd just come back from the small market in town, juggling 2 bags of groceries and a half-broken umbrella. I heard a car door shut and looked up to see her standing at the back of her SUV, trying to balance 3 brown paper bags in her arms. She glanced over, caught me watching, and smiled in that way people do when they know you've got no excuse not to help. "You look like you've got 2 working arms," she said, her voice calm and playful. "Mind giving me a hand?" "Sure," I said, jogging over before I could think too much about it. Up close, she was striking, probably in her early 40s, though it was hard to pin down. Her hair was pulled up in a loose bun, and she wore a soft gray sweater and jeans, nothing flashy, but the kind of effortless put together that made me feel underdressed in my hoodie. Her eyes were this sharp, smoky green, and she had a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "Elena," she said once we got to her front steps. "Liam," I replied. She gestured to the porch. "Set them down there." "Thanks." I followed her lead, and as I stood back up, she looked at me with a half smile. "You're the nephew, right? From the old Allen place." "Yeah, just staying for a while." "Good." That house always felt lonely when it was empty. Then she added, almost like an afterthought, "Coffee tomorrow morning. I make a decent cup." Meyer, it caught me off guard. Not the invitation itself, but the casual way she said it, like we were already neighbors and friends. I nodded, trying not to look too eager. "Well, sure. I'd like that." The next morning, I walked over just after sunrise. Her porch faced the water and had 2 wooden chairs with thick cushions, a small table between them with a ceramic mug already waiting for me. She sat barefoot, legs curled up under her, sipping from her own cup and staring out at the lake like it was an old friend. "You're prompt," she said without turning. "Military upbringing." I lied. She glanced sideways, smiling. "You're a terrible liar." We talked for nearly an hour about the lake, the people who used to live here, how the town had changed and hadn't. I learned she'd been here almost 5 years, lived alone, worked remotely in publishing. She asked me why I came, and I shrugged, saying something about needing air. "Air is good," she said, then added. "So is stillness. But it has a way of stirring things up." I didn't know what she meant. Not really, but I thought about that line all night. I lay in bed with the window cracked open, the sound of water lapping against the dock, and her voice still echoing in my head. Elena, there was something about her I couldn't explain. Something steady yet hard to pin down, like the lake itself. Quiet on the surface maybe, but full of things you couldn't see unless you got closer. And I knew one thing for sure. I wanted to get closer. Elena started showing up with things. The first time it was a paper bag with 2 blueberry muffins. She left it on the porch rail while I was sanding the edge of the dock. "From the bakery in town," she called out. "The one that still uses real butter." Then she disappeared before I could say thanks. Next time it was a bottle of wine, French label, red dusty neck, the kind of thing you don't bring unless you want someone to feel something. She handed it to me without ceremony. "You'll need this eventually," she said, "for thinking too hard or not hard enough." Then came the tomatoes, still warm from the sun, tucked in a small bowl with fresh basil. "From my garden." She said, "You cook, right?" I didn't, but I said, "Yes." Her visits weren't daily, but regular enough that I started to expect them. She'd walk over late in the morning or just before sunset, sometimes barefoot, sometimes with a wide-brimmed hat, always calm, like she belonged to the lake more than the house behind her. We talked about nothing at first. Weather, bird calls, the strange crackling sound the dock made at night. But slowly the space between us shifted. One evening we sat on her porch watching the sky change color. She had that bottle of wine open, the glasses half full. She looked at me and asked, "So, what happened with the job?" I hadn't really talked about it with anyone. But with Elena, it didn't feel like an interview, just space to say things out loud. Got cut. I said budget stuff supposedly. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't essential. She took a sip, her eyes on the lake. That word essential, it messes with people more than they realize. I nodded. I thought I had a plan. You still do, she said quietly. It just hasn't introduced itself yet. Then she told me about her divorce. She didn't go into detail. Didn't need to. Just said it ended quietly after years of silence growing too loud. She stayed in the house. He left. The town whispered for a while, then moved on. I thought I'd feel free, she said. But it just made everything louder. The loneliness, the second-guessing, the cold coffee in the morning. I didn't speak, just listened. There were long pauses between our sentences, not awkward, just full, like the air itself had weight. Sometimes she'd look at me and not say anything for a full minute, and I'd feel more seen than an entire years of small talk. One afternoon, I was fixing a loose shutter on the side of the house when she showed up with lemon bars. She handed me the tin, lingered a second longer than usual. Her fingers brushed mine. I don't know why it felt like a signal, but it did. We ate on the porch, the bar sticky and too sweet, but I didn't care. She asked me if I ever felt stuck between versions of myself. Like, you're not the person you were, she said. But you're not who you're becoming yet either. Every day, I admitted. She nodded, looking down at her hands. Same. The next evening, she didn't bring anything, just herself. We walked along the shore, barely speaking. The sand was cool by then, and the sky had that silver blue cast before night fully settles. At one point, I stopped to pick up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. 3 hops, she smiled. That was impressive. You should have seen me in middle school, I joked. Maybe I would have liked you then, too. I looked over, not sure I'd heard her right, but she was already looking away toward the horizon. There was something in her or I hadn't noticed before. Not just warmth, but intention. And when her eyes found mine again, they didn't move. I felt it in my chest. That mix of awe and confusion and pull. The silence between us grew heavier, charged like it was trying to decide what it wanted to be next. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just neighborly kindness. This wasn't friendly muffins and leg talk. Elena was watching me differently. Her gaze didn't drift anymore. It landed and stayed. She wasn't just sharing her porch. She was sharing parts of herself she hadn't offered in a long time. And I wasn't just accepting them. I was hoping for more. That night, I lay in bed with the window open again, listening to the same sounds. Water, wind, the occasional owl. But something was different. This time I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost when I left the city. I was thinking about what I might be finding here on this quiet lake in the space between Elena's words. It was midweek when she invited me. The sky had been playing tricks all day, shifting between bright and overcast like it couldn't make up its mind. I was out back trying to patch a section of the deck that had started to sag when Elena's voice called out across the yard. Dinner tomorrow, my place. No question mark. No, if you're free, just that low, confident voice I was getting used to, carried by the wind like it belonged there. I looked up, squinting toward her porch. She was leaning against the railing with a glass of something cold in her hand, watching me like she already knew what I'd say. What's the occasion? I called back. She shrugged. You exist. I cook. That's enough. It wasn't the invitation that got to me. It was how natural it felt, like we'd been circling this moment for a while now. And she was simply the one brave enough to land. I said yes, obviously. The next evening I showered, shaved, even changed shirts twice. Not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to feel like some guy who just rolled out of bed and showed up. Her porch light was already on when I walked up. The sun was still hanging low, bleeding color across the lake, but the warm glow coming from her windows felt different, like something private, something prepared. Elena opened the door in a soft black dress that wasn't formal, but looked better than anything I'd seen her wear. Her hair was down for the first time. It fell over her shoulders like a curtain, loose and wild in a way that didn't look planned. "You clean up," she said, smiling. Then she added, "I approve." I stepped inside and the smell hit me first. Something rich and warm. Garlic maybe, or rosemary. There was music playing low in the background. Old jazz, the kind that doesn't try too hard. She handed me a glass of red without asking what I wanted. I didn't ask what it was. We stood there in her kitchen for a moment, sipping in silence, like we were already halfway through a conversation we hadn't started yet. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, salad, potatoes with crispy edges. But the way she moved around the table, pouring wine, laughing softly, brushing her hair back behind her ear when it fell forward, it all felt intentional, not forced, but meaningful. At one point, I said something dumb about how I'd burned pasta last week, and she laughed, not just politely, but fully. Her eyes crinkled. She touched my hand across the table just for a second and left it there longer than necessary. That was the moment it shifted. The air got thicker, but not uncomfortable. The light outside faded, the room growing dim, except for the flicker of candles she'd lit without mentioning them. She sat back, cradling her glass with both hands, and looked at me for a long time before speaking. "I haven't felt wanted in years," she said quietly. I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. "That's hard to believe." "It's not," she replied. "Men want a version of me, not me." I reached forward without thinking, covering her hand with mine. "You're impossible not to want." Her eyes searched mine, and for a second, neither of us blinked. Then she smiled almost painfully. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was charged, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Her hand turned under mine, fingers curling slightly. We both leaned forward slowly, like we were listening to something invisible, urging us on. Our lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, not rushed, but trembling with the weight of unspoken things. There was a gentleness to it, but also urgency, like we both realized the wall between us had finally cracked open, and we didn't want to lose the moment. When we pulled back, our foreheads rested against each other. No words, just breath. She stood up first, gathering the plates, retreating to the kitchen in silence. I followed her, unsure of what to do with my hands, my heart still pounding. She rinsed a dish, handed it to me to dry. We moved around each other like we'd done it 1,000 times. Nothing more happened that night. Not in the obvious way, but everything had changed. When I finally walked back to the lake house, the wind had picked up. The moonlight water looked colder, restless. I didn't sleep much. My mind replayed every glance, every brush of fingers, every word she'd said. It wasn't a date, but it also wasn't not. Elena had opened a door, and I'd stepped through it without hesitation, and there was no going back. Now, a few days passed after that dinner, not because I was avoiding her, and not because she was avoiding me. It was just space, breathing room. We both seemed to understand it without needing to explain. I kept myself busy sanding more of the dick, organizing my uncle's chaotic garage, cooking for myself instead of living off sandwiches. But every little thing reminded me of her. I'd glance across the water and catch a flash of her on the porch, legs crossed, sipping something out of a tall glass. Or I'd be wiping sweat off my brow, and suddenly remember the way her hand felt under mine across the dinner table. That kiss wasn't something I could shake. It stayed with me every hour, every breath. One evening, just before dusk, I decided to walk over under the excuse of needing a tool, something simple, something I could return the next day. When I knocked, Elena opened the door without surprise. She had on a faded t-shirt, soft-looking, and jeans rolled up at the ankles. Barefoot again. "Need something?" she asked. "Drill. Maybe a flathead, too. The cabinet hinges are giving me hell." She smiled like she knew exactly what I was doing. Come in. The house was quiet. No music this time, just the faint sound of wind pushing through the trees and the rhythmic ticking of a clock in the hallway. She walked ahead of me, her steps light, almost soundless. In the living room, she turned and looked at me, not impatient, not amused, just still. You're nervous, she said. A little. Don't be. She stepped closer and rested her hands lightly against my chest, just above my collarbones. My heart was pounding. I think she could feel it. Her fingers didn't move. Neither did mine. Tell me I'm not crazy for this, she whispered. I looked straight into her eyes. You're the only thing that feels real. Whatever had been standing between us finally gave way. She leaned in slow, lips brushing mine, like a question already half answered. And that kiss, it was nothing like the first. This one had no hesitation, no space, no performance. We melted into it. She took my hand and led me down the hallway, her pace steady. Sure, the house was dim except for the soft golden light spilling from the bedroom window. Inside, the air was thick, not hot, but charged, like the room had been waiting for us. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulled me gently closer. No rush, no words, just movement, hands exploring with slow certainty, like we were both trying to memorize what the other felt like. Clothes slipped away, not with frenzy, but with purpose one after another, like pages turning in a story we'd both been reading alone until now. The moment wasn't perfect. It wasn't seed or cinematic. There were awkward shifts, breaths caught too soon, a laugh between kisses when I bumped my knee against the nightstand. But none of it pulled us out of it. If anything, it made it more real. We took our time. There was no script, no need to impress, just her skin against mine, her fingers in my hair, the quiet gasps in the dark that said more than words ever could. When it was over, we stayed tangled. No one moved to fix the blanket. No one reached for their phone. She pressed her cheek to my chest, her breath slow, her palm resting flat against my ribs. I watched the shadows on the ceiling shift with the breeze coming through the open window. Her scent, warm, clean, familiar now, lingered on my skin, like something that had always been there, just waiting to be noticed. After a while, she spoke softly, sleepily. Do you regret this? Not even close, I whispered. She didn't say anything else, just exhaled and pressed herself closer like she wanted to sink into me and stay. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't tired. I just lay there awake in her bed, feeling every inch of her against me and wondering how something so quiet could feel so life-altering. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't curiosity or boredom or some romantic detour in my messy 20s. It felt like something we'd both been waiting for, just without knowing it. As the sky outside began to lighten, turning from black to deep blue, I realized I didn't care what came next. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about failure or jobs or direction. I was just here with her, and nothing had ever made more sense. It didn't take long for things to settle into a rhythm. Not public, not defined, but something real all the same. Elena and I never talked about what we were. We didn't label it, didn't plan it. But mornings started to look different. So did evenings. I'd wake up early, make coffee in the lake house kitchen, then walk barefoot across the grass with 2 mugs, one for me, one for her. Some mornings she'd already be up, sitting on the porch, wrapped in a light robe, hair still messy from sleep. Other days, she'd open the door in silence, eyes soft, body warm, as she leaned into the frame. We didn't always speak. Sometimes we just sat and watched the light move over the lake like slow breath. And in those moments, nothing felt temporary. Nothing felt like an arrangement we were trying to hide, even if technically it was. The town was small. People noticed things. And Elena, she wasn't exactly invisible. A woman like her, confident, elegant, alone for years, was the kind of person people whispered about even when there was nothing going on. Now, there was something. And though we never talked about it directly, we both knew discretion mattered. We didn't meet in the middle of the day. No dinners in town, no shared errands, but in the spaces between, the quiet ones. We lived like something more than secret, I'd help her around the house whenever I could, fixing the loose steps on her dock, repainting the trim in her living room, cleaning out the gutters without being asked. The task didn't matter. It was just another excuse to be near her. Every chore became a brush of shoulders, a smirk across the ladder, a pause that lasted one beat too long. And every night I stayed, or every afternoon I lingered too long. Felt like we were carving something out of thin air, something that wasn't supposed to exist, but did anyway. We had another intimate afternoon in the guest room, the one she said she never used. The light was different there, softer, more golden. The windows cracked open just enough for the sound of birds and water to drift in. It wasn't rushed. We barely spoke, barely needed to. Everything between us moved slow, warm, unguarded. And when we were done lying side by side on the cool sheets, she turned her head toward me and whispered, "You've woken me up again." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't have to. "I don't want this to ever end," I told her. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Things like this don't last forever, Liam." I rolled toward her, propped on one elbow. "Why not?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for my hand and pressed it to her chest, just over her heart. Her pulse was calm, steady, but her eyes held something else. A flicker of fear, maybe, or just caution from someone who'd already lost too much once before. Still, she didn't let go. After that, we fell into a sort of routine. I'd spend the day at the lake house, cleaning, job hunting half-heartedly, sending out applications I didn't care about. And when the sky turned orange, I'd walk the trail behind her house, circle the back gate, and knock twice. She'd open the door, sometimes dressed up, sometimes in sweats, and just say, "You hungry?" I always was. Not for food, though she did cook better than anyone I knew, but for her, for the quiet warmth she carried, for the way she looked at me like I was exactly what she needed in that moment. And maybe I was, but the edges of it all started to buzz. One morning, I walked into the local coffee shop and caught two women glancing at me, whispering with that too casual air of gossip. I didn't hear what they said, but I didn't have to. It wasn't about me. It was about her. That evening, I mentioned it lightly. People notice things. Elena didn't look up from her wine glass. "Let them. They'll talk." "They already do," she said, setting the glass down. "And none of them have lived in this house alone for 5 years." I didn't push, but I hated the idea of her carrying that weight alone, of anyone thinking she had something to hide when everything she was giving me felt more honest than anything I'd known in years. Still, we kept to ourselves, and every stolen moment, every laugh in her kitchen or smile across the table made it harder to imagine walking away. I didn't know where it was going, but I knew how it felt, and I'd never felt anything like it before. The whispers came slowly, but they came. At first, it was just a sense, that slight shift in the way people looked at me in town. The way the guy at the hardware store paused too long when I mentioned I was staying at the lake house. Or how the woman at the market tilted her head when I said thank you and walked out with a bottle of wine Elena had asked me to pick up. Small things, quiet things. But I noticed Elena did too. One afternoon, I found her kneeling in her garden, tugging weeds out of the soil a little too forcefully. Her mouth was set in a tight line, and she didn't look up when I walked over. "They're talking, aren't they?" she asked before I could say anything. I crouched beside her, unsure how honest to be. "Yeah, a little." She pulled another weed. "What are they saying?" I hesitated. "That you've got a visitor. That he's younger. That it's surprising." She laughed. But it wasn't the warm kind. More like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. "Surprising? That's polite. Let them talk," I said. "They don't know anything." She turned to face me then, gloves in one hand, dirt smudged across her cheek. "They'll say I'm desperate or selfish, that I should know better." I reached for her hand. "And do you?" She looked down at our fingers, then back at me. "No, I don't." That night, I didn't wait until dark to go over. I walked straight through her front door just after dinner. No sneaking, no trail behind the house. When she looked up from the couch, I dropped my keys on her table like it was my own place and sat beside her. "You're not a secret," I said. "I'm not going to act like you are." Elena didn't say anything, just leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder, her breath calm and close. That made what happened next feel inevitable. We didn't talk much. Her hand slid into mine, slow and certain, and she pulled me toward the bedroom with a look I couldn't misread. This time everything was different. Not soft like before. Not cautious. It was need tension, like holding back had turned into pressure. And now we were both too full of it to do anything but give in. She kissed me like it was the only thing keeping her anchored, like she needed to be reminded this was real, not just a dream we had to wake up from. I didn't hold back either. We moved with the urgency, not rough but raw. Her touch wasn't delicate. Mine wasn't measured. And when our bodies met, it was with that mix of fire and fear, the kind that only exists when you know you might not have the luxury of time. Later, lying next to me in the dark, she trembled slightly, not from cold, just the aftershock. I turned toward her, brushing hair away from her cheek. "We're playing with fire," she said, barely audible. "Then let it burn," I replied. She exhaled. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a somab. "You don't understand what people will do with this. With us. Maybe not. But I know what I'd do if I let it go. And what's that? Regret it every day." There was a long pause. The kind that feels like a decision being made in real time. Then she whispered, "You love me." It wasn't a question I expected, but the answer was already there waiting. "I do." She closed her eyes for a moment like she was letting that settle somewhere deep. Then she pulled my hand to her chest right over her heart and held it there. "I wasn't planning on this," she said. "You know that." I wasn't either. Another silence. This one heavier but not bad. We lay there for a long time after that. Not speaking, just touching. Skin to skin, breath to breath. Letting the room hold us without the weight of labels or plans. The world outside could say what it wanted. The town could whisper and stare. But in that room, in that moment, all of it felt far away, unreal, like noise behind a closed door. What we had, whatever this was, didn't fit in neat lines. But it was ours, and neither of us was ready to let it go. The offer came one morning. I was sitting on the dock, feet dangling above the water, reading an email on my phone for the third time. It wasn't a dream job, but it was a real one. Decent pay, creative work, a fresh start in a city 6 hours away. A city without Elena. I didn't tell her right away. I needed time to sit with it to figure out what the feeling in my chest really was. Excitement, dread, both. That evening we sat on her porch like always. She poured us glasses of wine, asked about my day, and I gave vague answers. I kept trying to find the right moment, but it never felt right until she asked. Something shifted. "You're quiet." I looked down at the drink in my hand, then back at her. "I got a job offer." Her expression didn't change at first, just a small pause and her eyes holding steady. "Where?" "Baltimore." Another pause, a slower breath. "It's a good opportunity," I said, even though it felt hollow coming out of my mouth. "You should take it." That threw me more than it should have. Just like that, she looked at me for a long time before answering. "Liam, I can't be the reason you stall out. You came here to find direction, not to get stuck in someone else's past." I shook my head. "That's not what this is." She reached for my hand, held it between both of hers. "You're young. You still have so much waiting for you. Don't build your world around a woman hiding from hers. That's not fair." "No, it's not," she said softly. "But it's honest." Something in me cracked. I pulled my hand away, stood up, started pacing across the porch. "You keep talking like this is temporary. Like I'm gonna wake up one day and realize this was all just some summer escape. And what if it was?" She said, standing too. "What if it's not meant to last forever?" "But I want it to." She crossed her arms, defensive now, eyes bright. "You think wanting is enough to fight off the world. The judgment, the silence when it all gets too heavy. I don't care what they think. You say that now." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every word felt like it landed with its own weight. "I spent 5 years rebuilding myself, Liam. Quietly, carefully. And then you showed up like a spark and lit everything on fire. I didn't ask for that." "I know," I said softer now. "But we're here and I don't want to lose you just because life offered me a paycheck with a zip code." She looked away, eyes glassy. That paycheck could be the first step toward the life you've been trying to find. And maybe you're the reason I even care about building one again." She didn't answer, just turned and walked inside, leaving the door open behind her. I didn't follow right away. When I did, I found her in the kitchen, arm braced against the counter, breathing like she was trying to stay steady. I stepped behind her, wrapped my arms gently around her waist. "I'm not going because I'm running from this," I said into her hair. "But I won't stay just to avoid fear either." She leaned back against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, just of losing this before I've even figured out what it means." I turned to her gently, our foreheads resting together. "Then don't lose it." We kissed again, slower this time, not hungry, but deep and desperate in a different way, like we were both trying to take a part of each other with us, no matter what happened next. One thing led to another, and soon we were in her bed again. This time was different. Not fiery like before, not playful like the first time. It was quiet, bittersweet. Every touch felt like memory. Every movement felt like a goodbye we didn't want to name yet. Afterwards, she lay with her head on my chest, fingers tracing light lines across my ribs. "Promise me," she said, "that whatever happens, you'll live without fear. Don't make your decisions based on what you're afraid of losing." I didn't say anything, just pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. Because that promise, that kind of freedom, it had always felt impossible until her. I left on a Friday morning. The car was packed the night before. Boxes stacked behind the seats, a duffel bag riding shotgun. I didn't need much, just my clothes, my laptop, and a worn copy of a book Elena had slipped into my hand without a word the night before. There was no dramatic send-off, no tears, no grand declarations on the driveway. That wasn't us. Instead, we sat on her porch with steaming mugs, shoulders touching, watching the sun rise over the lake like we had 100 times before. The water was still, the air cool, and the sky turned pink around the edges, like it knew something was ending. She wore a soft flannel and bare feet, legs curled under her, hair pulled into a loose braid. I couldn't stop looking at her, trying to memorize the lines of her face, the way she breathed when she was lost in thought. We didn't talk much. She reached for my hand somewhere between the second and third sip, fingers threading through mine without pressure. Just there, present like always. Eventually, I turned to her. "Come with me." Elena smiled slow and knowing. "You know I can't." "You could." She looked down at our hands. "But I won't." I wanted to push harder. I wanted to say that this what we had was too rare to walk away from. But I knew the answer already. It wasn't about not wanting it. It was about timing, about life, about how some things are meant to shape us without carrying us the whole way. So instead, I asked, "Will you be okay?" She squeezed my hand. "I already am." Later, as I loaded the last of my things into the trunk, she helped me quietly. No dramatic pauses, no asking me to stay, just small, meaningful movements. Folding a hoodie, checking that the passenger window was shut, brushing a leaf off the windshield, like she'd always been the caretaker of quiet things. When I turned to say goodbye, she stepped into my arms without hesitation. Our last kiss wasn't wild or frantic. It was slow, full. It said all the things we couldn't in words. She whispered against my neck, "You gave me back my life." I pulled her in tighter. "You gave me a reason to live mine." We didn't say goodbye. I got in the car, started the engine, and pulled out onto the gravel path. As I passed her driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing there, hands tucked into her sleeves, eyes steady, watching until I was out of sight. The drive felt longer than it should have. I took back roads, let the windows down, let the wind fill the silence she left behind. There wasn't a moment when I suddenly felt okay. No song on the radio or sign on the road that made it easier. But as the hours passed, a warmth stayed with me. Not regret, not longing, just her. The imprint she left in my chest. I kept her close even as the scenery changed. Even now, months later, I still feel her when I make coffee in the quiet morning, when I walk by water, when I look at someone too long and wonder if they'll see all the pieces someone else helped put back together. Elena was never mine to keep, but she was mine to hold for a while. And in that while, she gave me more than most people get in a lifetime. We don't talk much these days. A few texts here and there, an old song sent with a half-smiling emoji. No promises, no timelines, but I know I'll go back. I don't know when or what it'll look like or if she'll still be in that White House with ivy curling up the porch, but I'll find her again. Some stories don't end. They just pause. And the part of me that fell in love on that lake, the part that learned how to be still, how to listen, how to feel everything without flinching, that part will never leave her. I carry her with me like the story of Liam and Elena unfolds like a quiet melody by the lake, a poignant reminder that love, even when fleeting, can reshape us in profound ways. Liam, a young man adrift after losing his job, finds solace in Elena, a woman in her early 40s whose steady presence and subtle gestures, muffins, wine, a shared kiss, ignite a connection that feels like home. Their bond, born in the stillness of lake air and charged silences, teaches us that life's most meaningful moments often come unscripted in the spaces where we dare to be vulnerable. Despite the whispers of a small town and the inevitable pull of Liam's new job offer, their love, raw, unspoken, and real, shows that true connection isn't about permanence, but about impact. Elena's courage to open her heart after years of solitude, and Liam's choice to embrace love, despite an uncertain future, reveal a powerful truth. We must seize the moments that make us feel alive, even if they're destined to pause. Their bittersweet parting, marked by a final kiss and no grand promises, underscores that love's value lies in how it transforms us, not in how long it lasts. This story urges us to cherish the people who see us fully, to live without fear of judgment, and to carry forward the warmth of those connections even when life leads us elsewhere. If Liam and Elena's tender, fleeting love touched your soul, share your story in the comments. Have you ever found a connection that changed you even briefly? Hit the like button if their journey resonated and subscribe for more stories that capture the heart of human experience. Join our community to keep these narratives alive. Let's honor life's fleeting, beautiful moments.